Are there any questions?
I guess, do you see starting this process like region-wide or starting with a specific county and trying to do that and build out of that when you're working in a region like this? How would you envision that process be starting as a region or with one county that you're working in?
That's a good question. Region-wide, definitely. Because if you start it in one county in the region, the other counties are wondering, well, what are they doing and why aren't we engaged and how, no, this needs, for a couple of reasons, it needs to be regional. One, to reduce the competition. Because when, say, let's just use a key example, a health department, a health officer from two counties get together in the region, they're more likely to learn from each other without this competition and without the lack of trust. They can build trust more effectively because they're actually discussing, it's peer education, peer-to-peer education. They're actually defining and discussing these issues, and they can go back to their county and then implement it effectively. So it definitely needs to be regional. There's no reason why it shouldn't. And that UCC has also organized this into a region, and so any kind of collective approach, there certainly should be regionalized.
So a couple of questions. During this 3-year process, new champions are going to kind of develop. Mm-hmm. So what happens during that period of time when you lose one of your champions? And that you have that momentum. And then my second is, with the health department partners, the typical health and human service folks, that's one particular group. But in the community-based organizations, there actually is competition.
Oh, sure.
Which is somewhat healthy as well, because I think it helps keep quality up.
Yeah.
So how do you address that?
Okay, well, for the second question, I do feel that, competition is always healthy if it's a healthy environment whereby the competition is, right? And so, but effectiveness, I think, can be enhanced with this collective approach. It's not that competition goes away. I don't know if that's how you viewed my presentation. It's not that that competition is a bad thing. It's competition that prevents movement or any one program from being effective. That really kind of siloed competition and that lack of trust. You can have trust and still be competitive. And so these organizations do need to be able to trust each other to work together effectively. And still, they're still going to have their own funding applications and their own programs. But to address this one goal around obesity prevention, to address this common agenda, they are going to work collectively and build that trust and start to be more effective. Because the truth is, a lot of the organizations are not effective in addressing the obesity epidemic. We're not seeing the movement that we need to see. And the reason is because they're not actually working together. This competition has taken over the relationship in the environment so that the efficacy is gone. And if they need to be that competitive in order to be effective in their one program, how effective are they on normative change? They're not. They're just repeating the same problem in their communities. Could you define your first question again to make sure I
Your champion.
Oh, the champion.
Especially in a small county.
In the small county. Well, that's right. And so that's what we're trying to overcome. In the small counties, I talked about the hierarchy of leadership and these old guard organizations that are always funded through block grants and whatever. And they've been there forever, and that's what they do. And if you lose that one, the whole thing goes to the wayside. Well, what we're doing here with the 3-year process is building and developing trust among all of the organizations so that whereby the group, if they do lose one champion, can shift around and stay with the common agenda. And that's why things fall apart in these smaller communities anyway, because if the champion decides for whatever reason, it could be political, it could be related to funding, that they're no longer going to be a part of it, they drag the whole process with them and it goes down. Well, this is a way of actually building a coalition or a collective group that is not so responsive to that. And so that our obesity prevention programs and addressing the epidemic can continue without just this one organization. Yeah, so that's the purpose.
At this point, we our started plans location in California. We have right now the approach to create the annual SNAP collaborative plans to put together all the SNAP funding agencies ready to work together. But it's only related to the SNAP agencies.
Right.
And we really, in some countries we are going a little more progressive, and other countries we are in level 1. So, and I believe the only way that we can have a collective impact is to incorporate not only the staff funding agencies and the traditional food health nutrition agencies, but also incorporate the other agencies and other organizations that you leave it at the end of the presentation. So my question is, how you can see in this order plan that we have to really have a collective impact when we are going to incorporate the other main actors of the community. And the second thing is regarding the time. Like that you have 3 years, we think that it will be reasonable to have 3 years to really finish with this collective impact agenda.
Well, 3 years and then to develop the backbone support and get the group in place and build the trust. That's really what it is. 3 years. We start seeing impact around the common agenda the second year. But 3 years so that it no longer needs to be funded by a foundation, or the funding can be reduced, and it's most likely that we could get another 5 years of funding to support the backbone organization. So development of the process and the trust building process does take about 3 years. But with relation to the SNAP-Ed funding, that's another example of whereby everybody's funded under the same umbrella. They all have the same kind of funding. And they really do have to participate in that process. And there still is some competition within. And so the point is to take that model really and expand it out. When I said multi-stakeholder in the beginning, I really did mean multi-stakeholder. You'd be surprised. One or two, a school board member that wants to participate in this, a local farmer that's engaged in food production to the community, one or two private interests that might be involved. You'd be surprised what they can do to help the group. So it's not just about all the nutrition-related folks, although, of course, that's the core of it. But it is integrating this larger collective impact strategy whereby the nutrition-related or funded activities can be expanded and enhanced. And so I do think that the collective impact approach that they're trying to put together for the SNAP-Ed funding, the problem with that, if you go back to this slide, the problem with that is that, right, it's all territorial to start with. So the good thing, so there's a positive and a negative. The SNAP-Ed funded folks, because there's so many turf wars, they do need to get together in a collective strategy and start to learn from each other and learn how to collaborate, even though every couple of years they're back to their GIS maps and drawing their territories and things like that. So I think that's very good that they're implementing the strategy so that these traditionally turf war type entities can get together and say, how are we going to actually be more effective in our programs? And that's good. But what we're trying to do with this multi-stakeholder approach is change the norm for all of the organizations working in the region to be more right around here, integrated and collaborative. And it's interesting what will come out of this. Obesity prevention is the theme or the common goal. But after 3 years, once this is developed, it will start to expand out. The network starts to broaden in the periphery, and the collaborations start to lead to more and more work that compounds on itself, that you wouldn't have foreseen in the first year when you're coming up with the common agenda. Yeah.
Show them the agenda.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry. I saw you.
I just have two questions. Anyway, that's the hard question. So,
Okay.
First is, can you just explain a little bit more about what UCCE's role in this would be? And then I think kind of secondary to that is how you would identify the stakeholder groups. And then separately from that.
Well, let me answer the first one
Oh,
first.
okay.
Okay, yeah, let's answer that first. So UCCE's role could be as the primary funder. And so if you, let me see. So as the primary funder, so UCCE could submit this application for development of the collective impact model around obesity prevention to a foundation and be funded to do it, but not actually, could just be the leader in implementing this in the community and not actually be at the forefront of doing the work, meaning that you can get funding for, say, $100,000 for 3 years, hire someone from the community to be trained on the group process, a neutral facilitator, and start to convene the group and be kind of the backbone support organization through the process, but also a participative partner. And this is okay. I mean, this is UCC's cooperative extensions model is to cooperate with the broader community, that it is to bring these entities together and to do this formative research, to understand place and to understand how to effectively change place. So development of this approach really is a means of us achieving those goals. And then you asked about the multi-stakeholder. How would you identify your stakeholders? Well, so the strategy that works best is to invite everyone, have it be an open call. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, a lot of organizations, once they learn about this process, that don't have access, that we want to bring into this process, that might be doing effective work that's siloed, that's not one of these leadership behemoths, that you invite everybody into the process. And it's the being selective that is the problem with it. So once again, the political, you wouldn't be in jeopardy necessarily politically. You're really inviting everybody into the process, anybody that wants to participate. But because the process is longitudinal, as we're going through all of these years, really this developing the multi-stakeholder collective impact group, once it's formed in the first 3 to 6 months, once everybody in the community has been contacted and they know about it and they whether they want to participate or not, you do have to close it off and you have to let them go through the process. It can't be something whereby organizations come into meetings, 6 months later they don't know what's going on. We're sharing data here, we're building trust. So in the beginning, it's an open call. Yeah.
And so then this slide is perfect. So my other question is about the data. So when you say data aggregation and then after that is the formative research, can you kind of explain how those two relate and differ and I guess feed each other? Sure. And then sort of, I guess it's sub to that is what if the data can't be aggregated? And what do you do at that point? If everybody's collecting data in such a different manner that it doesn't work.
Well, that's one of the first things that the group would work on. If we are collecting data and it's so siloed that we can't even tease out anything that makes sense around a common agenda, then are we working in a collective approach? Maybe it needs to be that we start to understand what it is and how to collect data to effectively address the larger problems. It could just be that. So, and when I say data aggregation, how does that differ from formative research? That the data aggregation process is something that the group needs to go through. And like you say, then you start to understand, well, can we even make sense of our collective data? How do we want to use it? And then the formative research is, once we somehow make sense of this, let's say it's beyond us just needing to actually start collecting better data, then we actually conduct some formative research, focus groups or surveys or, whatever the group would decide to do, to say, all right, is our target for what we're doing with our data right on with, let's see, are we hearing the same things that we're defining in our data set around our common agenda? So they are separate. They are two separate tasks.
There's a second part to this presentation.
Yeah, you asked for one.